The morning sun had just begun to filter through the glass windows of Riverside Community Bank, painting soft golden stripes across the tiled floor as the doors slid open. An elderly black woman named Ms. Helen Thompson stepped inside with slow, deliberate footsteps. At 76, every outing required a bit more energy than it used to, but today was important. It was the first week of the month, and she needed to withdraw money to pay her rent, an electricity bill, and pick up a few groceries on the way home. Her purse, a small, faded brown bag she had owned for nearly 2 decades, hung gently from her wrist as she made her way to the waiting line. Ms. Helen had always believed in doing things the right way. She kept her records neatly folded in a little envelope inside her purse, her ID card, her pension deposit slip, and a handwritten list of what she needed for the week. She had even polished her shoes that morning, convincing herself that if she looked presentable, people would treat her kindly. But as she stood in line, she sensed the familiar feeling of being overlooked. Younger customers moved with impatience, tapping their feet, glancing at their phones, while she stood quietly, hands clasped, hoping her turn would come quickly. The bank lobby buzzed with a mix of clicking keyboards, ringing phones, and muffled conversations. 2 children giggled near the loan desk, their mothers shushing them softly. A security guard nodded politely at Ms. Helen, offering her the first genuine smile she had seen since entering the building. She smiled back, grateful for the warmth. Her knees ached, but she didn't complain. She never did. Life had taught her that endurance was sometimes the only choice. She shifted her weight slightly, trying to ease the discomfort as the line moved forward inch by inch. She noticed a man in sunglasses, bald, muscular, and dressed in a simple black t-shirt standing a few people behind her. She didn't recognize him, but others did. 2 teenagers whispered excitedly, looking at him and nudging each other, but they remained respectful enough not to disturb him. Finally, after what felt like 20 long minutes, Ms. Helen reached the counter. She exhaled slowly, relieved. She gently placed her purse on the counter and pulled out her documents with trembling hands. "Good morning, sir," she said softly to the teller. Hoping to start the interaction on a positive note, the teller, a sharp-featured man in his 30s with a crisp navy suit and an expression that seemed carved from impatience, barely looked up. "Account number," he muttered flatly, tapping his keyboard before she could answer. Ms. Helen cleared her throat nervously. "Yes, of course," she replied, sliding the slip toward him. I just need to withdraw without waiting for her to finish." He snatched the paper and sighed dramatically, loud enough for the next few people in line to hear. Ms. Helen's confidence faltered. She felt her cheeks warm, her fingers tightening around the edge of the counter. She reminded herself to breathe. She reminded herself she had done nothing wrong. But the way the teller's eyes rolled, the way he exhaled in annoyance, the way he barely acknowledged her presence, each detail pricked at her dignity like tiny needles. Still, Ms. Helen tried to stay calm. She had come only to take care of her monthly errands. That was all. She hoped desperately that the rest of the visit would go smoothly. She had no idea how quickly things were about to change. Ms. Helen stood quietly at the counter, her fingers still resting lightly on the edge as the teller typed with an air of exaggerated irritation. The bank was busy but not chaotic. There was no reason for anyone to be rushing or raising their voice. Yet the teller behaved as though every second spent with her was a personal inconvenience. He glanced at her ID, barely half a moment before pushing it back toward her with 2 fingers, as if contact might somehow inconvenience him. "This ID is old," he snapped. Ms. Helen blinked, confused. "It's the same one I've been using for years," she said softly. "I always use it here." "Well, maybe you shouldn't," he retorted. "I need something more recent, or at least something easier to read." She looked down at the card. The picture was indeed old, printed when she was 60. The edges were a little worn, but the information was fully visible. "I'm sorry," she murmured, "but this is the only ID I have right now." He leaned forward, frowning deeply. "So you expect me to just take your word for everything?" "Ma'am, this is a bank. We verify things here." His tone dripped with condescension. Ms. Helen felt the sting of embarrassment crawling up her neck. She glanced over her shoulder, hoping no one was watching, but she could sense the shift in the room. People in line were beginning to notice the tension. Some looked away. Others pretended to stay busy with their phones. Only one Paravisa man in a black t-shirt remained fixed on the interaction. Watching closely, "I'm not asking for anything complicated, Ms." Helen whispered, trying to keep her voice steady. "I just need to withdraw my money. My pension was deposited 2 days ago. I wrote it down, see?" She unfolded a small note she carried, her handwriting neat but shaky. The teller scoffed. "That means nothing to me. Anyone could write that." He pushed the note back at her. "And speaking of deposits, your account seems unusual. Ms. Helen repeated, unsure what he meant. He turned his screen slightly, though not enough for her to see. "There are inconsistencies. Maybe you should learn how to manage your banking properly before coming here and wasting people's time." The words hit her like a slap. Wasting people's time. She had always tried to be respectful, patient, prepared. She had never raised her voice at anyone in public, not once in 76 years. Yet here she was, being spoken to as though she were causing trouble. As though her existence at the counter was somehow a burden. "I'm sorry if she started." He cut her off sharply. "Don't apologize. Just get it together." Honestly, older customers always cause the most problems. A few people in line gasped quietly. Someone muttered, "That was uncalled for." But the teller didn't seem to care. "Ms." Helen felt her vision blur slightly, not with tears, but with shame. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to keep standing, gripping the counter for balance. She wished her late husband were there. He had always known how to speak up, how to stand strong when people treated her unfairly. But she was alone, tired, and deeply rattled. Her hands trembled as she tried to reorganize her documents. But the teller rolled his eyes again, leaning back in his chair as though she were moving too slowly. "Ma'am," he said loudly, "if you can't provide proper identification or follow simple instructions, then I cannot assist you. Maybe you should come back with someone who can help you understand things." The words echoed in the lobby, humiliating her in front of dozens of strangers. Her breath hitched, her shoulders sagged, and for a moment she felt smaller than she had felt in many years. But before the teller could speak again, before Ms. Helen could shrink even further under the weight of public humiliation, a shadow moved beside her. Someone was stepping forward, and everything was about to change. The teller opened his mouth to continue lecturing Ms. Helen, but before a single word escaped, a quiet but firm voice cut through the air. "That's enough." It wasn't loud. Yet somehow it carried across the entire lobby, silencing the scattered conversations and keyboard clicks. Ms. Helen turned slowly, startled, and saw the man in the black t-shirt, bald, muscular, unmistakably familiar, stepping beside her. It took her a moment to realize who he was. Vin Diesel, the actor she had seen in so many movies, standing now just inches from her. Watching her with concern etched plainly across his face, the teller blinked rapidly, taken off guard. "Sir?" Vin didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His presence alone filled the space with quiet authority. "You've spoken to her with disrespect 3 times in less than a minute," he said, his tone even but unyielding. "I've been standing here watching it. She's done nothing wrong." The teller straightened in his seat, clearly flustered. "Sir, this is a private banking matter, and you're handling it poorly," Ving replied. He shifted slightly, positioning himself between Ms. Helen and the teller, his stance protective without being aggressive. "She's an elderly woman trying to withdraw her own money. There is no reason to raise your voice at her." The room had gone still. Customers who had previously been pretending not to watch were openly staring now. The security guard began walking closer, unsure if he was needed, though nothing about Vin's demeanor was threatening. He stood calmly, shoulders relaxed, his voice steady. Miss Helen felt her heart pounding. She wasn't used to anyone stepping in for her, certainly not someone like him. She swallowed hard, suddenly aware that she was trembling, pressed a hand against her purse to steady herself. Veng noticed. He turned to her, his expression softening. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he asked gently. She nodded at first, but her voice failed her. After a moment, she whispered, I just wanted to take out my pension money. I didn't mean to cause trouble. You didn't, Vin said. You didn't do anything wrong. He turned back to the teller, his eyes narrowing. She deserves the same respect as any other customer in this bank. If she's having trouble or moving slowly, that's not an excuse to belittle her. The teller's face flushed red. I wasn't belittling her, he muttered defensively. You told her older customers cause the most problems, Vin stated plainly, repeating the words that had stung the entire lobby. You told her she needed someone else to help her understand simple things. That's belittling. A ripple of agreement moved through the line. Someone said softly, he really did say that. It was out of line. The teller's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, a bank manager hurried, a middle-aged woman with a professional calmness that immediately changed the energy of the moment. What seems to be the issue here? She asked, though her eyes were already scanning the tension in the air. Vin explained briefly, without exaggeration, without anger, simply stating the facts. The manager listened carefully, nodding with growing concern. When he finished, she turned to Ms. Helen with genuine remorse. Ma'am, I am so sorry. You should never have been spoken to like that. Please come with me out personally. Take care of your transaction. Ms. Helen's eyes welled slightly, but she held herself together. She nodded. The manager gestured for her to follow.
Yes.
But Miss Helen hesitated and looked up at Vin. Thank you, she whispered, her voice trembling but sincere. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't stepped in. Vin offered her a small smile. You don't have to worry now, he said. Let's make sure you get what you came for.
Ow.
And with that, he walked beside her as they followed the manager to a private desk, his quiet presence serving as a shield from the humiliation she had just endured. Little did Miss Helen know, this moment would stay with her for the rest of her life. The bank manager guided Miss Helen and Vin Diesel to a small glass-walled office tucked in the corner of the lobby, a quieter space, away from the stares and whispers of the customers. The door closed gently behind them, muffling the noise outside. Inside, the room felt calm, soft lighting, a tidy desk, neatly organized folders, and a small potted plant by the window. Please, have a seat, the manager said warmly. Her name tag read Ms. Lawson. Her voice carried a sincerity that immediately softened some of the tension clinging to the moment. Ms. Helen hesitated. Still shaken, but Vin helped her into the chair before sitting beside her. Ms. Lawson took her spot behind the desk, folding her hands with a composed but concerned expression. Ma'am, she said softly, I want to apologize again. What happened out there was unacceptable. You deserved patience and respect. Ms. Helen lowered her gaze to her purse, fingers lightly tracing the worn leather. I wasn't trying to be difficult, she murmured. I just wanted to get my pension money. I've done this every month for years. You should be able to, Ms. Lawson assured her. Let's take care of it now properly. She turned to her computer and asked gently, May I see your ID again? Ms. Helen nodded and handed it over. Ms. Lawson examined it carefully, actually reading it, unlike the teller. After a moment, she smiled. Your ID is perfectly valid. There's no issue with it at all. A wave of relief washed through Ms. Helen's chest, loosening the tightness she had been holding since she reached the counter. Vin leaned back slightly, arms crossed not in aggression, but in a protective posture. Watching calmly, Ms. Lawson continued typing, clicking through Ms. Helen's account. Her expression shifted into a small frown nod of disapproval, but of concentration. Ah, I see what happened, she said at last. Ms. Helen looked up. Is something wrong with my account? No, not at all, the manager replied quickly, wanting to ease her worry. Your pension was deposited exactly as you said 2 days ago. The funds are there. The issue wasn't your account. She exhaled slowly. It was the teller. Vin's eyes sharpened. Go on. Ms. Lawson sighed, turning her monitor slightly so they could note the details, just the general screen. He flagged your account as irregular because of a system alert. But those alerts don't mean something is wrong. They simply require manual verification. A quick check. She tapped the screen. A process that takes maybe 30 seconds. Out 30 seconds. Ms. Helen repeated softly, almost to herself. Yes, Ms. Lawson said. But instead of verifying the alert, he assumed you were the problem, and he handled it poorly. Vin's jaw tightened. He handled it disrespectfully. Lawson nodded firmly. He did, and that will be addressed. I promise. She clicked a few more buttons, then printed a receipt. Your withdrawal request is ready. How much would you like today, Ms. Helen? Ms. Helen took a deep breath, trying to steady her voice. $250, please. Of course. Ms. Lawson prepared the paperwork, opened a small drawer, and counted the cash carefully, twice to ensure accuracy. She placed the bills into a bank envelope and handed it gently to Ms. Helen, as though giving her something precious. Here you go, ma'am. And if you ever feel uncomfortable again, you can ask directly for a manager. Or, she glanced at Ving with a grateful smile. Someone like him. Ms. Helen managed a tiny laugh through the lingering tremor in her chest. I don't think I'll always have Mr. Diesel with me. Vin smiled. You never know. But underneath his lightness was a seriousness that showed how deeply the moment had affected him. As Ms. Helen tucked the envelope into her purse, her shoulders finally lifted from their tense slump. The humiliation she had felt earlier still lingered, but now it was wrapped in something gentler validation. Someone had seen her. Someone had stood beside her as they prepared to leave the office. Ms. Lawson said softly, You deserve respect, Ms. Helen. Every customer does. And I'm truly sorry you were treated otherwise. Ms. Helen nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. Thank you. But the person she looked at, the one her gratitude was truly meant for her, was sitting beside her, waiting to walk her out with quiet dignity. When the office door opened, the soft hum of the bank lobby flowed back, in keyboards clacking, quiet murmurs, and the faint echo of a printer in the distance. But the energy had shifted. Customers who had witnessed the earlier confrontation now stood a little straighter, their eyes following Ms. Helen and Vin Diesel as they stepped out of the private office. Ms. Helen held her purse close. Feeling the reassuring weight of her envelope inside, she had gotten her money, yes, but more importantly, she had gotten her dignity back. And she owed that to the man walking quietly beside her, his presence steady, solid. And comforting, the bank manager, Ms. Lawson, offered one final apology before returning to handle the commotion at the front desk, where the rude teller now stood stiffly, clearly aware his behavior was under scrutiny. A few customers shot him disapproving looks. Justice, Ms. Helen thought, didn't always require a courtroom. Sometimes it simply required someone brave enough to speak up. Vin walked with her toward the exit, hands loose at his sides, steps unhurried. He didn't guide her or rush her. He simply matched her pace, as though ensuring she felt protected until the last possible moment. The security guard nodded respectfully at them both, clearly aware that something meaningful had unfolded in the last half hour. Just before they reached the sliding doors, Ms. Helen stopped. Her heart was still soft and fragile from everything that had happened, but she found the courage to speak. Mr. Diesel, she said softly, looking up at him, I want to thank you properly. I don't think I've ever had anyone step in for me like that. Not in a long time. Vin gave her a warm smile, the kind that softened the intensity that so many people associated with him. You don't need to thank me, he replied. What I did. That's what anyone should do. She shook her head gently. But not everyone does. Her eyes glistened, not with the humiliation she had felt earlier, but with gratitude. Deep, sincere gratitude. When he was talking to me like that, I felt small, like I didn't matter, like I was a burden. Vin's expression shifted, something protective flickering there. You're not a burden to anyone, he said firmly. People forget their humanity sometimes. That's not your fault. She took a breath, her voice softening. My husband used to stand up for me. He passed 10 years ago. Since then, well, I go places alone. And when people treat me badly, I just let it happen. I've learned to keep my head down, he shook his head. You shouldn't have to. A few seconds of silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but thoughtful. He wasn't rushing her. He wasn't trying to get away. He was simply there. Finally, Miss Helen gathered her courage. "I wish more people were like you," she said quietly. Vin chuckled lightly. "I'm just a guy who saw something wrong." "No," she replied gently. "You're a man who made me feel safe again." The word struck something deep in him. His expression softened even further. "I'm glad," he said, his voice low but sincere. The sliding doors opened, letting in a breeze that carried the faint scent of morning coffee from the cafe across the street. Vin walked her outside, staying close enough that she felt steady on her feet, but far enough to respect her independence. At the curb, he paused. "Do you have a ride home?" he asked. "Oh yes," she insisted. "My bus stop is just down the block." "I'll be all right." Vin looked unconvinced, but trusted her resolve. "All right then," he said. "Just promise me something." She raised an eyebrow. "What's that? If anyone ever talks to you like that again, don't let them. Speak up or ask for help. You deserve respect every day." Her voice wavered, but her smile was sure. "I promise." He nodded, giving her one last warm smile before stepping back, letting her move toward the sidewalk at her own pace. She walked slowly, but with her head a little higher than before, as she glanced back. Vin was still standing there watching to make sure she was safe. It wasn't just a moment of intervention, it was a moment of kindness she would carry for the rest of her life.